What if the only way you experience the world deeply, intuitively, and with intense perception isn't a challenge to overcome, but a strength to harness? Welcome to the Story Cafe. My name is Art Jones. I'm your host. For an interview with Rachel Eve Radway, we're talking about her new book, Perceptive. And why we think that this is important is because if you've been told you're too sensitive or struggle to navigate corporate environments that seem to reward detachment over depth, the book Perceptive offers a powerful reframe. Your heightened awareness, empathy, global thinking, and strong sense of justice aren't flaws to fix. They're superpowers to embrace. In fact, high sensitivity is a neurological trait shared by 30% of the population, yet frequently misunderstood or stigmatized. Drawing from research, wisdom, and insights from accomplished women leaders, and relatable stories from her own severe burnout, Rachel Radway reveals how neurodivergence represents not a limitation or weakness, but a powerful leadership asset. It's equally essential for HR professionals and executives committed to building inclusive, innovative organizations where everyone can thrive. Rachel is a certified leadership coach, a mentor, a speaker, and an author with 25 years of experience in corporate leadership roles. Listen in as Rachel provides us with the roadmap to turn our perception and sensitivity into superpowers in life and at work. Grab your favorite beverage, get a comfortable chair, and let's get started. I'm seeking to understand, there's a book that was written decades ago, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, that kind of gets to that soft skills and hard skills, right?
Mhm.
There was a conference. I wasn't there, but I read the transcript in 2012. The Dalai Lama, Desmond Tutu, and another thought leader were in the room,
Mhm.
and it was a peace conference. And somebody
Mhm.
said, Dalai Lama, please, if you can answer this question, I'd love to know, how do we achieve world peace? The Dalai Lama's response was, if Western women ruled the world, we would find world peace. And I thought, oh my. After that, I did a podcast of sorts. It was a live streaming before there was Zoom, but this is a dozen or so years ago. And the
Mhm.
question was, are women better leaders than men or vice versa? This thing went on for almost 3 hours. And men, of course, had a stake in the ground position. Of course, we're better leaders. This is the way it's always been. There are some women that model men because that's the only way to rise in the ecosystem of leadership in corporate America. If you don't, that was the standard. So they tamped down their on board skills that the Dalai
Mhm.
Lama was honoring.
Mhm.
I think that's what led me to really respond to what the Dalai Lama said when he thought world peace was Western women. And I just wanted to toss that to you and see what you think of that, because your revelation, like the Dalai Lama said, if your book is in the hands of more people in general, we will be in a better place because we'll be in a more regenerative leadership kind of mode where we're embracing the way we are as opposed to the way we thought we had to be from that 1950s style of militarism in the workplace.
Absolutely. Art, so many things that you just said bring up, well, everything that you just said brings up so many different things for me. I am familiar with that quote from the Dalai Lama and I love it. And I would say it would be interesting to hear more from him about specifically what he meant when he said that,
Yeah.
because I suspect that a lot of what he is talking about is traits that are inherent to a specific group of people who are not necessarily all women, but women tend to be more comfortable expressing the traits. So when I talk about highly perceptive people, there are a lot of us grew up with the messages that I mentioned at the very beginning. So we might feel that we might be raised with the messages that we are broken or crazy or weird or doing things wrong or too much or too little and not enough or just alone. And the message in Perceptive is, first of all, you and we are none of those things. There is a whole glorious world full of people who feel differently, process differently, think differently. All of us have strengths. All of us have challenges. And the strengths and the challenges are two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. And learning more about the strengths and learning how to leverage those strengths, one of the things that's true about a lot of perceptive people is, and I am going to interrupt myself a couple of times in the course of saying this because that is the way my brain works. But there's a book called The Brain of the Highly Sensitive Person, and I actually interviewed the author of that book in my book, and we have since become friendly colleagues.
Mhm.
We've had several conversations. There has been research done that shows that the brains of highly sensitive people optimize for group success, not for individual success.
Wow.
Now, anyone who has studied intercultural communications or other cultures may recognize in that there are some cultures who tend to skew more towards the success of the group rather than the success of the individual. American culture is not one of those. So that makes us, those of us who have more highly sensitive brains that are skewed that way, outliers in American culture. It would not make us outliers in, say, Japan or certain other Asian cultures that are focused very much on collectivism as opposed to individualism. So, one of the things I talk about in my book is intuition.
Mm.
I strongly believe that those of us who are in this 30% of the population or more are deeply intuitive. Again, something that everyone has, not everyone accesses, and not everyone trusts. And Western culture tends to train it out of us. So a lot of the, especially white collar professions, are data based, they're evidence based. People go to law school and they are trained out of using their intuition. People go to medical school and very sadly are trained out of using their intuition because intuition would help doctors hugely.
Yeah.
Um, but it is something that highly perceptive people have. And there's something about all of that information that we're collecting subconsciously that we are then connecting and making connections among. And it stays with us. There is something about reading a room and being able to understand nonverbal communication and facial expressions and body language and other things that we pick up more of than people who don't have this trait. All of these things, I think, are part of what would help create peace in the world.
Yeah.
There was in the past, and still in some cultures, an advisor class, a class of priests and other leaders of various kinds, whether religious or not, who are meant to understand what the people in general need and bring that to the rulers, the leaders. And to do that, you have to be not a ruler yourself, because rulers have to be able to be vicious sometimes and make very harsh decisions.
Yeah.
They have to have advisors who can see the big picture and connect data and understand people and read people and bring them their their advice, their suggestions, their recommendations based on those things. And she talks about this 30% of the population as being bred from that advisor class, or partially that's the reason for the advisor class.
Wow. The other word that I wrote down was coherence. Coherence is just the definition of systematic or logical connection or consistency. The integration of diverse elements, relationships, or values. And I think of our inner self and our outer manifestation. And when you were talking about corporate, your inner self was not aligned with your outer self, so you had to curate it. And that's hard. I think I did some of that when I was in corporate as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that curation takes some effort, and it kind of clouds your essence. So when you go home, that's where the work-life balance was born, because, okay, this is what I do at work. I know it's not me, but I just do this to get by, and this is how I survive and climb the ladder. When I go home, I can be myself. And that's disorienting, right? So is your book a guide to helping people be more coherent in their inner and outer manifestation of themselves?
I love that question for so many reasons, Art, and I'm going to try to answer it. And again, I probably will go off in a few different directions, just so you know. So I believe it is. I'm not sure I intended that when I wrote it. There are a number of different levels. So intersectionality is coming up for me here. You talked before about being a man of color. And so part of you understood what the model of leadership that, was espoused at the time was, and then part of you maybe was a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
I not only do we have genders and multiple genders and race and sociodemographics and cultural origins and a number of other things. Another aspect of the diversity that we have is neurodiversity. And that is really what the book is about. It's about both neurodiversity and finding coherence given neurodivergence. So the conversation about language, neurodivergence is a word that I use carefully because I think, like the word sensitivity, it carries a stigma and is also misunderstood.
Yes.
And just not well understood. And I think that it is more intimidating than it needs to be. Neurodiversity itself is just like the word diversity, except that you attach, the brain and the nervous system to it. So we all have our brains are all different. Our nervous systems are all different. That sounds pretty logical. Neurodivergence is a term that I have been surprised to find a lot of people that I've talked with have never even heard before, no less, do they really know what it means and what it is. I think everyone above a certain age was raised with a certain idea of what neurodivergent, we probably didn't know the word neurodivergence itself, but we heard things like ADHD and autism, and we saw the movie Rain Man, and we thought that that's what autistic people looked like, right?
Yeah.
We are just starting to learn that that is nowhere near what all autistic people look like. In the course of writing and researching for my book, I learned that not only do I have ADHD, I also have some autistic traits. Now, if you had asked me about this a few years ago, I would have said, no, that's not possible. I don't look or behave anything like the autistic people that I've seen. What I now know is there is a massive population of people like me, especially women, but also men, who are being diagnosed with autism or with subclinical autistic traits much later in life, because when we were 5 or 6 or 7 or 12 or 15, we didn't look anything like the people that were being diagnosed with autism, who
Yeah.
were, by the way, white young males.
Yeah.
So anybody that didn't look like any of those things, it never occurred to the doctors to even explore it, or to anybody to take them to a doctor. And there wouldn't have been a doctor who was qualified to do the diagnosis anyway. In learning about the autistic traits, the parts of the ADHD traits that hadn't made sense before suddenly did make sense. One of the things that I've learned is there is a huge uh, rate of co-occurrence between ADHD and autism, and
Oh.
several other neurodivergent traits. Massive. Like some people say that it's up to 85% co-occurrence.
Wow.
That's really huge, which emphasizes the point that neither one of those things actually looks like what we probably think it looks like. And they inform each other. So I talk about this a little bit in the book. There are stereotypical ADHD traits that are then changed by having autistic traits. So the whole thing looks different. What I want is for people to be more aware and to recognize and to celebrate that the fact that our brains work differently from each other means we complement each other. We have so much more access to more abilities and to different ways of feeling and thinking than we ever did before. And we know from research that teams that are more diverse are more productive and more innovative and more engaged and more all kinds of things, right? I
Yeah.
mean, this has been proven in all kinds of ways.
Absolutely.
This same is true with neurodiversity. And I think the biggest frontier is for some of us to be able to accept that in ourselves, because learning about who I am, learning more about me and the way that I'm wired, and the fact that I am wired a little bit differently, and that was not recognized for most of my life, has given me the ability to give myself grace
Mm.
for so much that blamed myself for in the past. I always thought, God, I know I'm smart. I know I'm competent. I know I'm talented. Why am I struggling with these things? Why do I keep doing that? Where are these patterns in my life coming from? Looking back on those patterns with the knowledge that I have now and the understanding that I have now and the self-compassion that I have now changes the entire landscape of my past and my future. So that comes back to the coherence that you were talking about. I have never been more myself than I am now, but I struggled for a really, really long time with that masking, with trying to be someone that I wasn't. And we also know now that there is a phenomenon called neurodivergent burnout, which
Mm.
is what a lot of people think burnout is, but more so coming from the actual physical, mental, and emotional effort that goes into masking and trying to be someone that you're not.
Wow. It's a lot of heavy lifting in the masquerading as someone that you think you should be, living somebody else's story, essentially, is what we're doing. Prior to our getting together today, I've been curious about neurodivergence largely, I think, during the pandemic when we were all online and having a myriad number of chats with the people from all over the planet. Um, I met someone who said, Art, I'm neurodivergent. And I was like, okay. It was the first real conversation I had with someone who was an advocate for themselves and people. And I think I came away from that conversation curious. And so, because that's something that I've been seeking to understand on my own, and I knew that you were the student of that subject matter, I asked one of my collaborative AIs that I engage with. I think my prompt was something like, "Aren't we all neurodivergent?" It's to that effect. And one of the responses was the neural continuum versus the neural type. The neural continuum versus the neural type dichotomy. Instead of thinking about neurotypical or neurodivergent as two distinct categories, consider a neural continuum. Every individual occupies a unique point on this multidimensional continuum of cognitive, sensory, and social processing. There it is.
So your your bot friend articulated that better than I have, and I honestly think that is the truth and the reality of our world. It is a very controversial point. There's a lot of controversy around this whole area for a number of reasons. And it may not be only what most people think of when they immediately process this. Yes, there are definitely people who don't necessarily want to think of themselves as neurodivergent. I do believe that even in the better understood context of it, the incidence of neurodivergence, the population who is neurodivergent, is much, much higher than any official data of any kind says. And I think that's true for a number of reasons. I've heard numbers up to 80 something percent, and it may be higher than that. I love the neurocontinuum idea.
Mm-hmm.
One of the arguments against the question, aren't we all neurodivergent, is, but then you are diminishing the needs or the importance of the people who have more needs. So if you take just autism by itself,
Yeah.
the whole everything that's going on with RFK and his nonsensical remarks and his ignorance,
Yeah.
I have heard very, very cogent arguments both for what he's trying to say and against what he's trying to say. First of all, a lot of parents of neurodivergent kids are neurodivergent. It is known to be highly, highly inherited. They are genetic traits, whether the parents realize it or not. But a lot of people are starting to get diagnosed later in life after finding out that their children are neurodivergent.
Mm-hmm.
That said, RFK is talking about a very, 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 very small percentage of autistic people. He is talking about autistic people with intellectual disabilities, and the two things are not automatically connected. There are tons of autistic people who do not have intellectual disabilities and are, in fact, intellectually gifted.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of people who say, well, if you say that everybody is a little bit autistic or a little bit neurodivergent, you are taking away from those people who have special needs and need more. The fact is, in some way, we all have needs, right? I mean, I went to a school for gifted children, and I still have support needs that are just not necessarily visible or obvious, even to me. It's only in hindsight now that I'm recognizing that, right?
Yeah.
The neurocontinuum explanation makes that argument, I don't want to say irrelevant because that sounds like I'm being dismissive. And I don't mean it to be dismissive. I mean it to be inclusive.
I've been tinkering with AI coaches, and you're a coach, I'm a coach. The International Coach Federation has now acquiesced and said, yes, there are AI coaches out there that are capable of coaching at a PCC level. That's 500 hours of coaching.
Yikes. I hadn't heard that.
And that's 24/7. That's there, but it's still just the large language model, right?
Yeah.
It has a conversation, but it doesn't have empathy in the sense that it doesn't have lived experience We were talking about San Luis Obispo, and you said 20 miles north. AI could put the pin on the map and know what that's at. I've been on the coast highway. I know what it feels like. And AI could never do that. And I think from a coaching perspective, lived experience, the essence of what our real true value has always been, but now more than ever. And the neurodivergent conversation, let me back up and say, this notion of AI advancing rapidly and our need to understand it so we can engage with it or not. There's a World Economic Forum and somebody else published a report that said in 2030, these are the skills that will be viable in the workplace: creativity, innovation, design, systems thinking,
Hmm.
and critical thinking. And someone that's neurodivergent might be better at all of those things than I am in their own special way, which will find the thing that guides the AI to some amazing outcome. And so I think AI is forcing us to come to terms with what skills are viable in the future when AI is doing some of the work. And my research, my backyard research, suggests that people that have unique skills and super niching skills, this is the niche that they care about, this is all they care about, but they're really invested in that niche, they will find things and sense things and experience things in a way that others won't. And that adds credence. So going back to the book perception, that helps me or the reader connect with that piece of me that I've tamped down because it didn't fit with somebody else's impression of what thriving meant, now is empowered to say, so 2030, huh? If my skills that I've always tamped down are now in the upper right hand quadrant of that four paned matrix, maybe I can finally unleash myself and find joy and happiness in the work and be honored for it like never before. So, your book is a gateway or portal that people can go through. And Einstein kind of believed what you believe. That famous quote of his: the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have forgotten the gift and we have worshiped the servant. We got industrialized, and Henry Ford put everybody on the assembly line, and it was time and motion studies and do more, do more, do more, faster, faster, faster. Intuition doesn't operate in that zone. Intuition is the coherence of intuition lives inside us.
Hmm.
And if we don't give credence to our inner self, we can't manifest the sacred gift that we all have, intuition. And I think if your book is a vehicle to help people just read the books and then break a journal out and start noting things that they find about themselves that they really never thought about themselves, that are written about by the people you've interviewed in the book, and they say, I've never thought about it quite that way. Let me write down in my journal the time that I too experienced what that person that you interviewed talked about. They can find superpowers that they always had, but they never honored, that now they can, and that can change the arc of their journey going forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Your book is really an amazing gift. It's like intuition, it's a sacred gift that you're speaking about, that those that pick it up and have the joy of reading it and discovering things about themselves or somebody that they know and love or collaborate with, a partner. I think it's something we need now more than ever. Um, Another somebody I like to quote a lot is Lao Tzu, the author of the I Ching, who said, knowing others is strength, knowing yourself is true wisdom. And
Hmm.
so thank you for your work on the book. And thank you for this wonderful conversation, which I know we've only scratched the surface, which there's so much more. I know that you've interviewed 14 really interesting people. Is it 14 is the number of?
Uh, I interviewed 16 in the book, but it's not interview style. It's I bring in pieces of their stories as they're relevant to the topics that I'm talking about in the book. So it's my own story and theirs and pieces of all of them and their wisdom and mine and some research too.
Well, it's if I can ask, are there things that you could encourage somebody to do, strategies, like journaling, we talk a lot about, but is there something that you write about in the book or something that you can offer in this moment to the listening audience that might help them crystallize or catalyze some awareness about themselves that helps them on this journey to self-awareness?
So one of the things that I mentioned in the book is a that I actually describe and talk about, how to do it step by step is a visualization exercise that you may be familiar with your clients. But it's something that anybody can do on their own. Think about, give yourself a time that is within somewhere between 6 months from now and 2 to 3 years from now. And give yourself some space and some quiet and make sure you're sitting or lying down comfortably and maybe set a timer for 5 or 10 minutes and visualize or put yourself into a future in which you are feeling happy, content, fulfilled, like you are doing what you are meant to be doing. And you are living where you're meant to live, and you are interacting with the people that you're meant to be interacting with. And then observe everything you can about that space, about the space itself, the physical space, about the light, about how it's decorated, about what's around you, and then how you spend your day, how you wake up in the morning, what time it is, how your day is laid out, um, who is there in the space with you, who you talk to or meet with during the day. Any little detail is important in this exercise. You want to observe and notice everything that you can. And then when you come back from it, journal about it. Note everything that stood out to you. Note what was the same as in your current life versus what was different. Note how you felt about those things that were different in that future space.
Mhm.
And from there, and this is something, even if you're working currently with a coach, you can bring this to the coach
Yeah.
and say, hey, this is my, future vision. How do I get from here to there? So that's one of the exercises I do with clients all the time. They love it.
it's it's a
It
It's a wonderful exercise, Rachel. I feel privileged to have had this conversation. I encourage everybody to go get it. I will be doing that and leaving in the show notes a link to the Amazon page where they can pick it up, and to your website where they can just engage with you and find out more about the work that you do. Thank you so much for making time to spend this time with me. I appreciate you for that. And I look forward to, it's probably a 16 episode Netflix series that we have here in this journey that you've been on. 25 years of corporate, and then 8 countries and so many years, and what a wonderful story that it is when it that's another book, I imagine. So I won't ask you to spend 16 hours with me having those conversations. I'll just wait for the book to get published and I'll read that then.
Art, it has been a pleasure. People have asked for that book, and that book may happen at some point in the future. I'm not sure, but this has been a pleasure, and it's been a great conversation. You're right. We could go on and on and on. I think there are a lot of different ways we could expand this sometime in the future. I would love to hear your thoughts on perceptive when you have a chance to read it.
Absolutely. I look forward to another chat and many more in the future. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I've had. And I look forward to joining you all again on the Story Cafe, where we talk to thought leaders that are thoughtful leaders doing interesting work to change the world. So once again, Rachel, thank you. And until next time, everybody, bye for now.